1 o'clock. Are you ready to work? All right. Call this meeting to order. Jeff Zimmerman and I are present, and we're here to meet with Dan and discuss disaster services, information and updates. So, take it away. What's going on in your world?
Well, I'm glad to be here. Certainly nice to put, I already know your faces look like, but.
Sorry about that, yeah.
Thanks to your campaign efforts, but so it was good to get together with you finally and start this process and this relationship. So, so here we are. What I did today was I threw together kind of an outline of notes, really. What I just kind of bring us up to date, that would give you something to go back and look at, because I'll have a tendency to ramble through a lot of stuff, and some of this stuff is a lot of acronyms and a lot of that would be easy to forget what it is I did say. What's also in there is a series of charts for the different grants that outline the monies that are in each one of those grants. And I'll briefly explain those, but I'll leave it to you to dive in deeper into those. We don't need to get super into the weeds. By any means, if I'm saying something you're not understanding or confused on, let me know, stop me. Sometimes I assume people know things that they don't know.
Well, we're gonna go slow on this. Let me interrupt and say, is this Tracy's copy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's make her, I'm gonna see if Matt wants this, and I'll
Well,
just
I'd like to,
make,
if you don't mind.
yeah, and then I'll give this one, I'll make a copy for Tracy.
Well, I have one too, so she can have
You
it
have
when
one
we're
too?
done.
Okay.
And I can send you
Trying to keep everybody
I understand.
in the loop, and
Thank
in
you.
fact, that's why we're filming too. We've been posting.
Yep.
RG's been helping
That's
post
right.
for the public. All right, Dan, take it away.
Well, so here we are. I'm the Disaster Services Emergency Manager. I've been doing this since January of 2018. Back then, they didn't have an emergency manager, and so we put together a program or a process to split the duties between planning and zoning and emergency management, and we did that. So I've been doing this since then. So we're starting my 6th year, I guess. The real goal for emergency manager is to establish and maintain the operation of an emergency management program. What does that mean? Well, basically, you manage the grants that are handed down through the Bureau of Homeland Security, FEMA, and the Idaho Office of Emergency Management, and then finally down to the county. So in that first highlight there, in the EMPG is the Emergency Management Program grant. That grant's a 50% match grant, meaning it's a little confusing, but they put out a grant, and this year's is 30. This year's is 33,046. So what that means is that we get reimbursed for half of that. So a total of 16,000 and some change. That grant is for the fiscal year operations. It includes my salary, the benefits package, program expenses, running the office, vehicle, operating the emergency operations center if need be. It also can help pay for some of the training and exercise type events we can put on, training and exercise events, or if we attend events that maybe cost money or we have to travel to go to, and there's some expenses involved in that. That's where those expenses can be covered under that grant. As an update, the 21 EMPG, which was for the fiscal year of 22, it is complete. On there it shows we had a 3646 overmatch. What that means is we spent $3,600 more than what was in that grant, and so the county paid for that overmatch as part of its expenses for the department. What happens with that overmatch, though, is other counties don't always use all their EMPG money. In fact, there's a handful of counties that don't utilize the EMPG program at all. So that money, that $30,000-ish, and that's based on population, so other counties get more money and other counties get less. But so at the end of each of these cycles, there's usually a pot of money left over, some amount, and then IUEM looks at all the counties that spent more than theirs, and they divvy it up. Over the past few years, we've got a couple thousand here and 3,000 there, and just kind of depends on what is available and then how many departments they need to split it amongst. Certainly, if they've had a county that has experienced a significant amount of disasters and a significant amount of expenses in a year. They try to really help that county out by giving them a little more, so. Anyway, I put that in there because it wasn't overspend, but it's a potential for being reimbursed in some way. shape,
And
or
what
form.
drove the overspend? Was that the year we got
In
the
this particular
windstorm?
case, we had an exceptional amount of repairs to the emergency manager vehicle last fall. Like almost $4,000 worth of expenses to fix it. And you'll see in the budget, there's only like $2,500 in the budget for general repairs. And then there was definitely an over amount from the county budget from their restructuring of the department, and then upping my hours to 30 hours a week for the remainder of the 6 months for about 5 months of the fiscal year. So there was an overage in that in the budget for that.
Is that what you're at now, is 30?
30 hours. It's considered a half-time position or part-time position. And the way that works is the grant is for this much, and the grant is based on our population. Some counties spend a whole lot more, and they fund the whole department with people. Some counties spend what they can and match it, and that's the dollar amount. So historically, we've always taken that grant money, and that's been roughly the budget for that position. And that's why it's typically always been some form of a half-time position. So the 2022 EMPG, which is for fiscal year 23, the numbering is always confusing. I have to be careful when I say things because it's when it was issued, not for the year that it covers.
Gotcha.
So the 2022 EMPG was issued this last fall, and it's based on our fiscal year of October 1. But it's for the fiscal year 23. So it was funded at $33,046. Again, we get half of that. That's $16,000. The first quarter reports and the first request for reimbursement is in process, and that's part of what these sheets are here. We report out every quarter to IOEM on how we're doing with the management of that money and where we're at on the different projects. And this is also the opportunity for the county to request its. We spend the money.
And get reimbursed.
And then we request the reimbursement. So whatever we spent this first quarter, and then I'll put that in a report and in a request, and we'll get a check for half of that back. And that happens throughout. The other big grant, or the grant that I manage, is the SHSP, which is the State Homeland Security Program grant. That is 100% grant, not with no match. However, it does come with pretty strict criteria for project funding. It's very specific. It has to be a nexus to Homeland Security scenarios or disasters, or we use the word terrorism all the time, even though that sounds weird to say that here. So it's Homeland Security programs, but what that also means is mostly it's interoperable communications. Cybersecurity is a big thing they're super concerned about these days. There's a whole list of the things they want you to concentrate on. Community preparedness is another big one where we can make sure we're updating and keeping track of our emergency operations plan and our all hazards plan and any other plan we want to put together. And that helps, and sometimes we can put together a project to maybe help the schools or some of the other larger community type, the hospital, maybe help them put together their emergency operations plan. Because each entity tends to have their own, and then we coordinate that together. So it also helps pay for training and exercise. So again, if we're putting on an event, expenses associated with that. Sometimes that even means paying some expertise to come in and put on that class. There's not a whole lot of money in that grant, so there's that money gets spent pretty fast with different things. It's typically about it's been in that 27,000, 28,000 range. You see there that the 21 SHSP is pretty much closed out. We've spent almost all of that. That in there that says $460.62 remainder. We've spent the rest of that grant, and that's the remainder out of the expenditure. So I'll find a way for somebody to buy something for $460. Probably will be, technically that money is in a cybersecurity project, so I can always pull it out and put it in a different project if that's where it's best needed. But we'll probably just hand that off to BJ and have him spend it on something. And that's how we're That has to be done by April 20th of this year. These grants run on an 18-month cycle for me. It's actually a 3-year cycle for the IOEM. So it's always in some state of, if you weren't here, but just a couple weeks ago, we got the official letter for the closeout of the 2018 EMPG. So the state finally did the thing, sent us the official letter that said we were done. So. Getting here, so it's always a little bit behind. If we ever need to know, I can make sense of it, but it is a little bit of confusion to figure that out. That's what these charts help us with too. So the 22 SHSB, we got a raise this year. We got $31,834. It's been applied for and funded, and so we're in the process of identifying the different projects. As a note here, go back to these forms. The first one is listed at the top, the 21 EMPG. This shows that what we just talked about as far as the expenditures. Those couple of notes in there were at the bottom where it says the sub-grantee funds used and the matching funds. That's where it shows that disparity of 3,600. The 22 MPG just demonstrates where those projects are funded. IUAM makes me break it down into fuel expense, vehicle equipment expense, and then the rest. So as we spend those monies throughout the year, that's what those monies are slotted in there for, is to show that separately, so it doesn't get lumped in. That's a federal government thing is what I've been told. So we just do it.
Yeah, don't ask.
So the next form there is the 21 SHSP, and what that shows, and again, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but it shows the different projects we worked on, what was spent on them, shows that they're either completed. Some of these it shows canceled. It means we had projects in there, but we decided to spend the money somewhere else, so we canceled that project and created a new project in there. The two at the top that say on order, those were just recently done, and so there's a base radio on order for Fire District 1, and there's some cybersecurity firewall system stuff being installed and ordered for Fire District 2, and that'll close out those two projects as soon as those are installed and money's been spent. Then we can close out that grant. The 22 SHSP shows that when we apply for it, we can't just get the money. We have to tell them how we're going to spend it, and so we typically put together. One of the requirements is that 25% of this money is spent on law enforcement, for law enforcement. So we put in a specific project in there, and that's the one at the top for $8460. That's 25% of the total. And what we'll do is we'll go to the sheriffs and local police departments, and we'll create projects for them. We listed as radio mobile at first, but if they need something different that fits in the program, we'll change the criteria for that particular project. But that money's slotted for them. The 13,000 is slotted for basically everybody else for different projects. Typically radio, and we have some need. I'll talk about that in a second. What our goals are for this. The next one is cybersecurity. We put 5,000 in there to keep updating our firewalls and our cybersecurity for the county. And you saw from the last one, we were also able to spend some money on the fire districts to do the same thing. The ones in there that are related to training, again, that's in there as a kind of a placeholder for training and exercise. In the years past, we've been able to go participate in somebody else's training. It didn't cost us anything but maybe a road trip over there. And the handful of workshops and or tabletop exercises we put on here, other than a few expenses for some snacks and a lunch, there really wasn't a whole lot of expense there. So we didn't spend a bunch of money, and we were able to roll that money over into other projects. So later you'll see that. If we don't spend it on training, we'll roll it over into some other project, and we always do everything we can to spend it all, for sure. So I also put in there this year the one at the bottom there for trailer and equipment for and we just honestly just threw $3,000 at it. We weren't sure what we're going to have to spend on that one, and that'll be something we'll determine and figure out if we need more or if that's way more than enough. We've got 3 trailers that are in some state of, as an asset, but they're not used. And so we've got an old incident command trailer. We've got a trailer that we procured from, actually the sheriff's office procured it from the Idaho Department of Lands as one of their old incident command trailers. And then we've got a mass casualty unit trailer that was purchased through some Panhandle Health District funding way back in the early 2000s. And so we've had, at least early 2000s. And so we've got a trailer sitting out there at the hospital. It's full of a bunch of equipment that we essentially can't use. And so that's a kind of a waste of assets and energy. So we're gonna look at how do we turn that trailer into something we can not only use for emergencies, but also for large events for the county. And they're gonna, particularly if we have a large accident where you might be on scene for, more than a 12-hour shift period. This trailer has all kinds of equipment in it for triage tents and trailers and tables and chairs, and it has a bunch of medical equipment that will be transferred to the ambulance district to do it that way. But so we have the incident command trailer that was originally outfitted with a bunch of electronic equipment and screens, and it's partitioned out for operations, logistics, and planning and communications. And this, that, and the other happened to it before my time, and it's kind of sat vacant. Sat not used. So these two trailers sit out here at the Osborne shop, and then the other one's out at the airport. So we have a goal to figure out what to do with them, and we use this money to enhance the equipment in them, make them usable, make them functional for our purposes here, and then start the maintenance program on them and make sure we have them as assets for our use. So that's why that's in there.
Maybe sometime you could show us those trailers?
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of, as we get down to the bottom here, I put a little bit of note in there about the different groups and networking that I try to be as involved as possible with anything and everything emergency management. So that Northern 5 County EM group is all the Northern 5 County emergency managers. We meet quarterly and we share training and exercise a lot. And so that's always worked out really well. In fact, the past 2 years we've done joint exercises, and that's worked out really well. We did, in fact, this last summer we did a ham radio communications one that really worked out super well. So that works pretty good.
Is that the thing I participated in by Zoom here a month or two ago? It was in Bonner?
Similar, with the same group of people put it together.
Okay.
But that group decided, hey, and we do it every time there's a new election cycle, is because we've got incoming elected officials that may not know what their role is, and as part of it. So we put on that class, and we brought the folks from IOEM up to try to do that to get everybody's feet wet a little bit with that. And so yeah, that was that same group of people who put that on. And that was again an example of how we share time and effort to do things for the greater good. I'm part of the Shoshone County Fire District Chiefs Association. I attend their monthly meetings and keep them updated on what I'm doing, vice versa, make sure I'm doing what they need from me. IEMA is the Idaho Emergency Managers Association. I'm the vice president for this northern region, and so every year we do that conference that normally dovetailed in the same hotel as the Idaho Association of Counties convention or conference that's going on at the end of this month. This year we moved it to the Boise Center, so we're still going to be there at the same time. But we moved our conference over to that facility and doing that. So that's a meeting of all the state's emergency managers with IOEM and folks, and we get a bunch of people to tell us how great emergency management is and learn some stuff and hear from vendors and hopefully it's usually a pretty good time and pretty good information. And it's really helpful for small communities like ours that we don't have a staff of people that are able to figure out training and exercise and resources, and so it's a really great way to network and create a good scenario and it really is, because people post questions to the group and 33 emergency managers will respond to your email, do this, don't do that, so it's really pretty helpful. The Idaho Association of Volunteers in Active Disaster, I participate in their monthly, they have a monthly meeting, and I listen in. It's a statewide thing, so there's a whole lot of information that doesn't necessarily affect us, except for when we have a large disaster, that's the group we would be leaning on, and the folks that network with through there. You know, the first one everybody thinks of is Red Cross, but there's certainly lots of local churches, local groups, and that's what I focus on is, you know, the Real Life Ministries folks and the different church folks and the different Kiwanis and the different groups that'll, you know, they're the ones we're gonna lean on if we really need some help at an emergency center or evacuation center or any of that kind of thing. We've been blessed to, other than 2 years ago when we had the big fires, I did set up an evacuation center at the school, and one person came and stayed, so it was worthwhile, you know, kind of a thing. But yeah, that was kind of a new one on me for sure. And then certainly I attend and pay attention to as many local regional responders, meaning Panhandle Health District, Kootenai Hospital, our own Shoshone Medical Hospital. We're keenly involved with them, and police departments as well. So just do everything I can to be as involved with them as much as possible so we can be a resource to them. At the bottom I put in what my 23 tasks and goals, you know, are, and the big one was to restart the LEPC. We stopped having LEPC meetings back in March of 20 for various reasons, and we never really picked it back up. I still, you know, attended, you know, the chiefs meetings. We still worked pretty closely with all the first responders, so we really never had a giant need. We had just renewed our emergency operations plan in 2020, and so, but here we are definitely coming upon some needs for that group to be reinvigorated. So a couple weeks ago we did that, and next month we'll kind of kick it off for sure with everybody. And then we'll start through these different tasks. And the big one's gonna be to review our emergency operations plan, just make sure it's updated, make sure all the contacts are in there correctly, because certainly there's always people come and go. And then part of that emergency operations plan is to put together what are called resource binders. And that's basically a contacts list of who's who and who's got what. When we have a big disaster, you know, everybody that's responding may not be experienced at it. And so we need to be able to hand somebody a book and say, call these people, call those people. And so we want to set ourselves up for that. So that's going to be kind of a big endeavor to put that together and have that available. So in the past we just handle it. You know, well, that's not a very good plan. You know? And if we have then that's worked because the county has never once set up its emergency operations center. They call it standing it up. Now, when COVID came, when we had the windstorm, a handful of first responders and everybody, we all met, and it was a sort of an emergency operations center, but really it was just we met, what's everybody doing, what's everybody need, and it wasn't long enough of an event when COVID was. But even with COVID, we met weekly with this group of the hospital and PhD and the whole group. So it was a quasi-emergency operations center, but we met wherever we could meet, which was usually at PhD or one of the fire stations. But anyway, we want to put that together. The other goal is to figure out these incident command trailers that I just recently talked about and figure out a plan for those. There'll be the trickery of who owns them, who's responsible to maintain them. One of the things right now is that mass casualty unit, the memorandum of understanding lists me as the first person to go get that trailer and show up at a scene. Okay, well, somebody calls me, sheriff calls me and tells me to respond to a scene. How fast can I get there? Absolutely. Except I'm not sure I should be the one that does that. Now the truck I drive, that's emergency manager truck, was bought with that trailer and was given to emergency management as the vehicle to do that with. And it's a 3/4 ton Dodge that'll pull that trailer. So it's one of those things that's kind of, should that be, we may need to rediscuss that and figure out that maybe there's other folks that would be more suited for responding that way. So we'll figure those out. And then I always put on there the quarterly training and exercise workshops. I'm hopeful to put on at least a workshop every quarter, and then certainly participate in any of the other ones that are going on. Bonner County is particularly active in putting on trainings, as well as Kootenai County is pretty active in putting on numerous trainings throughout the year. So it's always a good opportunity to go sit in on their thing and get what we can out of it, so. That's a 20-minute overview of the highlights. Certainly, as there's more questions, ask away. I anticipate in the future, certainly as we get together to know more of the details of what is going on, I'm more than happy to sit with whoever need be and make sure everybody's clear on how that money's getting spent and how that position's being managed. If you don't know, I have an office out at the airport.
I saw that the other day, yeah.
And so it's set up for me out there, and I can work out there. I work from home sometimes when I don't need to. A lot of what I do is participate via computer or email, and so early on when they did this restructuring, there wasn't an office, so, and because of COVID, there was a pretty good setup for working from home. Even though in P&Z we never really worked from home much, and so we made it work. But so if you see my truck in front of my house a lot, that's why, because I'm at home. But,
so you don't have any office here in the courthouse?
I do not.
Okay. And tell me again how your salary is structured. It's part grant or it's?
The MPG grant is a grant that funds half of that dollar amount. So the county budget, and I don't have it in front of me, for this year was whatever that number is. And so I want to say I should know it. We will get reimbursed for up to $16,000 out of that budget. We'll spend it first, so that's why it's in our budget to be spent. We'll spend it as we go. We'll get reimbursed as we go back.
Okay. So partially it's funded through the grant and partially through county?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
The dollar amount was always derived from the bulk of the money divided by 20 hours a week equaled the dollar amount. That worked coming out of P&Z, and so that's where that, right now, my dollar wage is based on that.
So before restructuring, were you doing 20 in P&Z and 20 in this?
Correct.
And when was that restructure?
March 1st last year was the effective date.
Okay. Well, I know I'm gonna have an interest in maybe attending a training or two with you once in a while, just to kind of get the picture of what you do and what your capabilities are, and because I'm interested in the topic.
You betcha.
If you could kind of keep that in mind.
You'll always be invited, and certainly the LEPC monthly meetings is a real good opportunity to sit in, for one of you to sit in on that. And then that really helps keep updated on what's progressing, but certainly as we have trainings and we have specialty workshops, you'll be more than invited to any of those. And, at any time, if you want a meeting, then certainly we'll.
Okay. But keep in mind, if there's a certain training coming up that you think would be a good overall, I don't probably have the time to get down in the weeds, but something that gives me the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish and goals, or a good example of the kind of thing. It would be nice to be a little more involved than just to wave at you once in a while.
Understood.
Questions, Mr. Zimmerman?
I don't have any questions.
I don't even, I have a million questions, so but I gotta jump in slow here and start figuring this all out, so. Okay, so you're working out of the airport in your home office. Okay. Well, how about the community? Do we have any questions from or comments from the community?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Why, I
Chair
don't
recognizes
know.
Don.
If I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask about things, management-wise, as far as what enforcement or code is happening on the river for floods, as far as there's a time frame when campers are supposed to be out of there before they can set back up again. Is there anything happening along those lines that is going to take place, as far as whether it's FEMA or the county or whoever saying no more of these things left within a certain, foot from the bank, campers and those skeletons of gazebos and things like that. Is that something that disaster services handles? Is that part of the overview where someone is supposed to be enforcing those people getting their butts out of there November 1st? There's a lot of it later on the river.
I can answer that.
I'd be curious to hear the answer.
That's what I came for.
Unfortunately, the answer is not me, man. But the real answer is the emergency manager position is not a regulatory position.
Right.
It's a management of the grant funds and a position to set up for preparedness and response and to aid in that endeavor. Those issues that you talked about are a couple things. One, they're in the site disturbance or they're in the floodplain ordinance, and so planning and zoning has been historically responsible to enforce those. The recreational vehicles being in place a certain time frame a year used to be in the floodplain ordinance and is no longer in the floodplain ordinance. And so that was taken out when we revised the floodplain ordinance back in 18-ish, I think it was. It was nearly impossible to enforce, and it wasn't a FEMA requirement. And so that was something that was added in back in 2006 when they revised the ordinance. It was the same time they increased the footage requirement for lot frontage on waterfront to help eliminate the bowling alley lots. And so that's why we have a number of the bowling alley lots until 2006, and then the subdivision ordinance restricted that, and the floodplain ordinance restricted that and made them wider. So that rule came into place with that said you needed to have your belongings and RVs off of your property, out of the floodplain. It was pertaining to the floodplain. So you didn't have to get it off your property, but you had to get it out of the floodplain between November 1st and March 31st. Well, from the get-go, we have flooding activities before November 1st, and we have flooding activities well after March 31st. So it was a near useless law anyway. And then it was in the law, or in the ordinance, it said, or in case of imminent threat. Well, so in January, when we get these warm temperatures and we get flooding in January, and in fact, 2 of our largest floods happened in January, not in March. There was, part of that was that case. Was if the trailers weren't there, they won't be damaged. You're still responsible to remove your personal gear prior to that. So, in the end, it was very difficult to enforce for that reason. So we ended up through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So it wasn't just my decision to remove that from the ordinance.
So if I understand you right now, it's perfectly legal for people to leave their trailers in the river waiting for the great RV
Within the
car
floodplain.
wash.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Certainly not smart, but
Who pays for that? When the floods happen and ultimately the emergency responders have to remove all of that from the river.
it becomes part of the debris.
And so those people in the end have no financial responsibility towards keeping their things out of the floodway. Is that what I understand? Is it all ends up going back to taxpayers and volunteers to cover everybody else's butt?
In a sense, the answer is yes, because it comes out of the FEMA disaster response for those things. If it reaches the level of being declared a disaster at the state level and on up. But you're right, it certainly becomes then part of Public Works' problem to clean up those things. I can make the argument that what FEMA said was it's really difficult to go through the debris and figure out whose it is.
Wow.
And so to go back and have any retribution, and that's why they weren't interested in putting rules in place that you couldn't enforce, and that was sort of the impetus for that. Certainly I think some other things can be done, and certainly if there's ways to hold people accountable, then there's that, because certainly what we worry about is those sheds and those buildings and people's homes coming down and running into our bridges and plugging up our culverts, you know, really do cause an issue, so, that's why.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
thank you.
That helped?
Thank
There's
you.
a history
It,
there.
it did help. I don't like
It doesn't have,
But-
right, right.
It's not the answer.
I
Just
remember
understand,
liking it.
yeah.
Just
One
have
of
to
the things we did with
understand
that
it.
was to try to eliminate some of the minutia of rules you can't enforce.
Well, that's also, yeah,
And-
silly to make a rule you can't enforce, but it does still leave us with a problem. Yeah.
Especially as our recreation gets thicker and thicker and thicker every year. My goodness, the stuff
Well,
that's
maybe
left
all that
out.
wreckage will slow the jet boats.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
we were thinking, or the jet boats should be incorporated in pulling them out.
Put them to work.
That should be their responsibility.
Thank you. Any further questions from the public? Any further comments you can think of at this time? I'm gonna wanna pick your brain about.
You'll learn that if you let me, I'll talk for a very long time and tell stories, and so. Everybody.
That's
you
not
know,
what she said.
And that's okay, I own it, both my parents are very good storytellers, so.
Okay.
But by all means, that also means that if you want information, I'd be more than glad to give it to you.
Okay.
And I don't have any reason to, I want people to understand these things in this department, this position, these things can be complicated. And so by all means, there's no reason to.
Okay.
And if I don't understand, well, then there's certain resources at the state and other county, I got other emergency managers we can lean on to get good information, so don't hesitate for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time and the information,
Taking my time.
and look forward to working with you.
You betcha, you too.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.